Mini episode 1228 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello everyone, welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1228. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here, and we have one of our favorite FDH Lounge dignitaries on today, our MMA editor Jake Digman, and he is going to be talking about developments in UFC now that they have resumed their programming, and of course this is the next installment in our Coronavirus Crisis 2020 series, going through and looking at life during lockdown, and there's of all the weird things out there, of course, cage fighting during lockdown, MMA during lockdown is one of the more interesting facets I think that we've covered thus far. It's the empty arena era, just like our two-part WrestleMania coverage that we did during this. It's a much different atmosphere for MMA, and MMA at its highest levels, the UFC, during this. So we're going to look at the two fight cards that have happened since UFC revived, UFC 249 and UFC Fight Night. A couple of debacles attached to each. Of course, the coronavirus positive tests that marred UFC 249, and the fight that apparently went on too long during UFC Fight Night. And speaking of debacles, there is Dana White's attitude towards the man, the heavyweight champion of the world, Stipe Miocic. We will get to that as well. You know, Jake Digman and I will not miss that story. But again, nobody better to talk the mixed martial arts with than the man who knows more about it than anybody I know, my good friend Jake Digman. Jake, glad to have you back on, my man. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. You know, still quarantined, hold up here in the old in the Casa de Diggins. But yeah, when you said debacle, I thought that you said it was a debacle. I thought that was the big segue to introduce me.
That would never be the case, my man. It is never anything but the greatest of privileges and pleasures to get my man Jake Digman on. Whether we're talking UFC, whether we're talking the pro graphs, whether we're talking any of the other subjects, you and I have talked politics on the show previously. Always a pleasure to get into any of these things with you. But when you are looking at the middle of the dartboard, when you are talking Jake Digman wheelhouse, UFC and mixed martial arts is right there. There's any number of things we could talk about with you, but you really can't go wrong making it MMA.
Yeah, the thing is, though, I got to have full disclosure with all the listeners out there. It took a quarantine to get me to buy a UFC pay-per-view that didn't have one of my friends competing on it. Not that I didn't watch their pay-per-views, but sure. I just never watched other pay-per-views. I would either go to store, go to bars or whatever that didn't have it. But the UFC this past Saturday, despite my personal opinions about the head honcho right now, they responded back and presented on paper one of the greatest fight cards ever in the history of the promotion. And I think Saturday night's event, it lived up to the hype for about as much. I don't regret that I spent $65 on it. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's start there, because when I saw on Facebook that you were ordering the card, I was bemused for the very reasons that you just mentioned. No obvious connections that you had to this card. I know that you're very jaded about the leadership of UFC right now. So is it as simple as, hey, we're in quarantine, nothing else going on?
There?
Yeah.
Okay. No, yes and no.
Okay.
I think that had a lot to do with it. If it wasn't quarantine, would I have watched the show? Yes. Would I pay for the show? No.
Okay.
I can put it that way. I would have gone somewhere and watched it, maybe gone to a friend's house, or, a lot of these things, the social aspect of it. But also at the same time, what kind of made it work for me too is, and I think this will work for a lot of people, is that there was nothing else going on. And me, with my background for being involved in MMA in some capacity or another for 15 years, there were so many fall on my news feed. So it was like my social media. It was just like chatting with friends about this. So it felt like it was with people, but not. And it was interesting. A couple people had made comments. They were talking about how they didn't know how it was going to be with the empty arena. And there's some things that happened during this. So but I'm like, I figure empty arena MMA. Like, heck, I've announced shows where it wasn't supposed to be advertised as an MMA empty arena match, but it surely was. So, like, sure, the UFC might not have been using it, but they were. Like, they had the Ultimate Fighter finales. When they done finales of the episodes of the guys would fight on the Ultimate Fighter, there was no one there. They were just fighting in a gym with, like, guys.
Right.
And it kind of was like, yeah. So, empty arena MMA isn't really featured. And even, like, AEW, we talked on the other show, for you can do empty arena pro wrestling now. Vince McMahon can't produce studio wrestling, but that's because he just doesn't know how, and no one ever taught him. And they also got against him that he has a pile of unwatchable crap right now.
Right.
UFC, however, it was actually fairly watchable because essentially it's the exact same presentation. And let's be honest, the crowd doesn't really have a damn thing to do with MMA show.
Right.
They don't. Every once in a while they'll cheer for something. As soon as it goes to the ground, they sit on their hands and forward. So it's not like wrestling is different. Wrestling, you need a crowd. I think that's the only quote unquote sport that you need that, because the crowd is a character in the show. The crowd has no bearing on MMA whatsoever, except for there was a couple fights that happened that if there was a crowd there, they would have been on their feet and like approving, because I was on my feet in my living room. So
Sure.
You knew that would happen.
Point well taken, and I'm not one of those MMA purists, so yeah, I'm the kind of guy where when it goes to leg locks on the ground, that kind of stuff, I'm kind of not into it as much, but we can think of a couple instances where the crowd does factor in, but just the fact that we can think of these things proves your point. It's the exception to the rule. I would say Stipe defending the world heavyweight title at the Q is one instance where the crowd mattered.
Well, yeah, or fighting in Ireland,
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be some scenarios where the crowd really adds to it, but it's not as predominant as it is. There are heels and faces for the most part, like there is the sport games.
That's true. That's a very good point. And so it was an empty arena setting. There were a lot of weird things about this. So it's taking place in Jacksonville, same place. And again, Florida right now has been the MMA/wrestling capital of the world. Not since Gordon Sully was saying so long from the Sunshine State has Florida loomed so large in these matters because of, again, you like that? Governor Ron DeSantis allowing them down there. And so you've got the WWE in Orlando at the Performance Center, Daly's Place attached to, I believe, the football stadium in Jacksonville is where AEW has been, unsurprisingly. I mention AEW because their guys during the week were staying at the same hotel as the UFC guys. And again, a little bit of, I don't know how big an outbreak it was of the coronavirus, but it hit at least one of the fighters on the crowd, and apparently some of the ancillary figures participating in the show as well. So a lot of wrestling fans were holding their breath that the wrestlers would remain untainted by it. But I will say, FDH Lounge dignitary and sportsology proprietor Russ Cohen, when he was on the show, he has a background in hotel management, and he said the last thing in the world that you should have is all these guys in the same hotel, and that when you're dealing with a pandemic, the notion that it's not going to affect anybody there is just sort of foolhardy. So the entire structure of this thing in the first place, as far as installing them in a hotel versus putting them all in individual quarantines, that part of it going in said that things were maybe going to be a little bit screwy, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something, you look at the necessity of this, it's like, I mean, unless they're going to, I would just assume they would have just rented out a whole entire hotel.
Sure.
I don't really see like there being a huge demand for tourists right now, especially not in that area. But, I mean, that's kind of, I didn't know that. That's kind of interesting that the AEW guys and the UFC guys are all staying in the same hotel. But I guess it makes sense because they were all in Jacksonville. So, as soon as they said they were lying from Jacksonville, I was like, why don't you go to Daly's Place? It's right around the corner. It would have made a much better venue. And you get that outside field, too. But I'm pretty sure they don't take down the, they don't up all the time.
Probably, which, by the way, going back to, I think it was Fight for the Fallen that they had there last year, just a side note on all of this. Am I alone in thinking that Daly's Place, with or without people in it, is one of the coolest effing backdrops for wrestling that I've seen? And particularly when you look at the time of night that it is, that it's dusk out there, so you're starting to get the sunset peeking through the pavilion there. I love Daly's Place for watching stuff. MMA there would be pretty cool also.
Well, me too, and I'll make this comparison because long-time you'll get this, and long-time listeners or people who know my background will understand. Like, first time I saw Daly's Place on TV, it reminded me a little bit of Nautica, the Flats.
Yeah.
Just that whole, like, so the idea of doing UFC card there, I'm like, oh shit, it's like Fight Night in the Flats.
Absolutely.
We just call Destruction and Daly's or something. I mean, that's like, that was my first thought process, first time they showed that. But that said, I wish AEW would leave Daly's Place to go to whatever little hole-in-the-wall gym they were at, because I think they had a much better presentation when we were there, especially with everything going on. I don't know. When people live there, it's cool. And AEW does it a lot better with having fans around the ringside or whatever. But, I mean, as far as, like, a venue goes, that's bigger than what they were at. It's certainly a lot smaller than the 14,000-seat arena that the UFC has rented out for the foreseeable future, which is like, I don't get that. But
yeah.
Maybe the deal was already in place. Maybe there was free rent. There's got to be something that was like, or maybe, again, maybe the same thing as with Vince McMahon, Dana White is a stickler for production and presentation, and he wanted that actual full arena field presentation for the show. That's the only thing I can think of. Like, I'm surprised it wasn't I was telling you, I'm surprised it wasn't a smaller venue. Remember they used to do the old shows at the Joint and the Hard Rock, like the early Ultimate Fighter days?
Yes.
And it was like that little, I loved that venue. It was one of my favorites because it had that, like, you were on top of a hill. Like, that's why my favorites are always, like, Gray's Armory. Because you felt like you were on a balcony and you looked over into the cage. The UFC doing something like that would be super cool. Like, given this, like, underground fight club, the best that they're going for, they want big radios. I get that, they're a publicly traded company. They're just owned by, like, 10 billion different pieces.
Yes.
Kobe Bryant was one. We found that out when he passed away, unfortunately.
That's right. That was the case. By the way, the place, AEW, I mean, I had to laugh when I found out, probably within, I don't know if it would be walking distance, but at least close to what has been my home away from home for the last 15 plus years, Norcross, Georgia, down there in one of these wrestlers' gyms. That was where they had the arena set up. Yeah, Norcross, Georgia, my man. That's where they were at. So I would be...
Yeah, I think Georgia, it was QT Marshall's gym, I do believe, is where they were at. I should know it that close to the stone's throw from one of your Sonic fans.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if I'm going to be making my usual holiday season jaunts down to see my brother's family, but if I do, I'm going to insist on at least driving by that place just to see it from the outside, because it was fun watching the shows from there. But as far as the amount of fun watching the UFC 249 show Saturday night, again, from everything I could tell on Facebook, from seeing all of your running commentary, you really seem to be enjoying it. What were some of the best parts of the show in your estimation?
I'm not quite sure that Tony Ferguson is human. Just seeing, which is a complete difference in the amount of someone being, it's a tale of two cities from the fight that we saw on Saturday night in the main event with Justin Gaethje. I'm also pretty sure he's not human. And I can't wait to watch this dude get out there and fight Khabib or whoever it is that he's set up. This dude just pulled through everybody. Tony Ferguson just taking shot after shot and just kept going. And when he finally stopped the fight at the end of round 4, he was like, he had an argument saying that he was getting back up. And some people are saying, okay, I could kind of see that, but also, you were also getting killed. And he got some severe damage. So it gets to a certain point where no matter how good, because the fighter's never going to see it. They're standing and walking. They're never going to be like, I quit. Unless, they're a first-time fighter and they would never make it to the World Championship level anyway.
Right.
But, see this, I'm actually bringing up the card right now just because it was a week ago. I'm trying to
while you're doing that, it's an interesting point that you raise as we jump ahead a couple of days to fight night, because it was very, very controversial. The fact that, again, and I didn't watch it, so I don't have an opinion, but I am almost always somebody who really errs on the side of stopping something if it seems like there's great physical danger, because it can happen in the blink of an eye in MMA. And apparently that marquee fight with Teixeira, in the opinion of most people, seemed to go on too long. That it was already a done deal before that point. And then again, knowing what we know now, and really should have known all along, at least on an anecdotal level, about head injuries, CTE, that kind of stuff, it does seem shameful from everything I've heard, at least, that fight didn't get nipped in the bud earlier.
Yeah, that was on the exact opposite of what I was reading of, actually, because they had, it was Anthony Lionheart-Smith, I believe, yes.
Yes.
And the old man, the veteran, Glover Teixeira, 40 years young, and they're still doing this thing, still picking up a win. But, it was one of those, watching it, and, like, I've seen hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 fights at this point in my lifetime of doing this. Very, very rarely have I ever sat there and cringed so much. Like, my entire feed, while we were, like, Facebook Live watching it, was the wife from Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 going, "Go in the damn town!
Right.
Stop the fight!" That's all it was, because you're like, at the end of round, mind you, this is the end of round 3, going into round 4. He's on top of, Glover Teixeira is on top of Anthony Smith. He's just pummeling us, and he's showing no signs of defense. Then it's like, okay, and he gets this no clue where he's going, and he comes out for round 4, and I'm a little shocked. I'm like, okay, but you know what, though, maybe he did his thing, and, passed the doctor's exams, whatever. Goes to round 4, and round 4 just gets bald, and I mean bald, to the point where he looked at his cornerman and they said, "How are you feeling?" He said, "I'm missing 2 of my teeth."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all of his cornermen just start yelling at him and send him back out there.
Yeah.
And he continues to get unnecessarily bald again, where you look at it and you go, man, okay, so where's the accountability fall on something like this? Number one, it should have been that referee's position. Okay, look, you're not intelligently defending yourself. I don't care what you're doing down there, you are not intelligent. But even beyond that, once it gets his UV out of his hand, what was that doctor looking at? And his cornermen were just like, blah, 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 blah. I haven't seen cornermen that bad since Ronda Rousey. Swear to God. I don't remember his name anymore, who was Rousey's cornerman, and he was terrible. And these guys surpass that so much. Where it's just like, I mean, what fight are you watching? Like, what you're telling him, go in here, and he says, okay, looks like that's you go, hey, our dude's not in this anymore. You have to stop this. And the fact he went down at the end around 5, and like I said, I've never watched a fight since like looking at it going, okay, end this. My girlfriend's watching, she's like, why are they letting, this is almost a crime.
Yeah.
It's like, why are they letting him go back out there? I'm like,
Yeah, and that should never be the case with MMA. It should always be, for as much as Dana White and everyone else has their whole moral vanity about, oh, it's not the human cockfighting it was in the early days. Really? You could have fooled me when you have stuff like that happening, again, from everything I heard about it. And it's a thing, too, where those cornermen, they seem to be the equivalent of, if you remember back a couple of years, the Browns doctors that were examining Colt McCoy. I always said at the time, I think the questions they were giving him were at the time were, what are you, some kind of pussy? Why wouldn't you get back out there?
Yeah, pretty much. But, that's also it's part of that culture.
Right.
That, not a big part of that culture, because people who know better know they look out for their guys and girls. But there is a subset of that culture where it's like, okay, we just want to win. I think more so that falls on the shame should fall on the doctor in that fight. Because he should have looked at him and like, he cannot go. Like, he suffered a broken orbital bone, he lost 3 teeth, he was a concussion and something else. Like, for what? It's like, okay, not only did he lose, he lost the definitive exclamation point because no one looked out and protected him.
Well, and I got to say, too, that to just take a wide-angle lens view of MMA and my observations from being your friend and being at so many shows that you've ring announced around Ohio, my sense of it, and if I am being a Pollyanna, chances are you're not going to call me on it, because if I'm a Pollyanna, you probably are too, is I have glimpsed this, whether it be the Strong Style team or some of these other gyms where they show up and they support their guys. What I see whenever I see anything at the shows that you're at is like this warrior culture, but it's respect, it's professionalism, it's dedication to the craft, and again, I use the word professionalism, and that these guys are all about doing it the right way and competing and whatever. And if you don't have that undercurrent of respect, you really don't have anything. And I would find it impossible to believe at any of the shows I've ever been at that you've ring announced that anything like that would happen, not least of which because I don't think any of the cornermen would conduct themselves that way, if nothing else.
I agree with you. I've seen some inexperienced cornermen, but I've also have been fortunate enough to work with some of the, and work on shows with some of the most experienced cornermen around that, quite frankly, without naming names, that have yelled at other sides.
Sure.
Not yelled at, but kind of like educated, you know, and a very stern warning. It was just like, hey man, you got to look out for your guys more so.
Right.
You know, it's like some of the best of the best. You know, they're number one, they don't let something get in there unless they know they're 100% ready, and number two, they're going to look out for their guy. And at the end, are they mad they lost? Yeah, but they care more about the person than they do about the victory. And
right.
sometimes in this situation, it came across like they care more about the victory than they do the person. And and unless he killed him, he wasn't going to kill him. But unless he like got a miraculous knockout, he wasn't going to win that fight. He wasn't even close to winning on paper.
Right.
So that makes that one kind of fun. But I did bring the rest of the UFC card up
okay.
here, which is from 249.
All right, give me your thoughts.
Okay, so here's what you know they're going all out. I'm skipping over the prelim, the early prelim fights, the first three fights. Versus the one, the second one, Brian Mitchell Charles it was a 30-25 across the board, a 30-24. How that even possible? Holy crap! I don't even think I watched that, to be honest with you. I think I was inside.
I don't think you missed anything.
Yeah. Then we start off with the most interesting scoring I've ever seen in a fight where it's like, what? Actually, before we even get into that, before we get to the Carla Esparza versus the Karate Hottie Michelle Watterson fight, which is interesting. Mind you, this is the first fight, or the first or second fight on ESPN for the prelims, and it features a former UFC world champion, and that just like sets off the tone for the rest of the night, which is really, really cool. You know, every single fight that was on this card could have made evented either a Fight Night Live or a pay-per-view, which, you know, kudos to them. But the best part was this whole social distancing thing. At the beginning of the paper, or the beginning of the television broadcast, you had police one to ESPN. They're standing there, I forget who the UFC's main announcer is. I don't know. We'll call him not Mike Gold.
Right.
And then there was Joe Rogan, and then there was BC. You know, and I gotta be honest, I love BC. I just don't love him when he's fighting our friend.
And poking him in the eye.
Super
Yeah.
cool dude, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, I got no ill will towards him. It's not my friend in the Indian bastard. I don't know. But, so the show opens, and like, they're first starting, like, was on the prelims, like, the early fights. And all of the commentators were sitting halfway, like, all around the arena. Like, there's, like, judges were, right? So they're not sitting next to each other, and they're watching on monitors. Yet at the beginning of it, when they do the show open, they're standing next to each other, and Ken Rourke goes, "This is just weird, man. This is all just weird. Like, we are sitting on opposite sides of the arena from each other, and they told us to wear masks, yet we're standing next to each other right now, not wearing masks. None of this makes any sense." So there's that, and I was just like, okay. And then, so going back to the card, you got Carla Esparza defeated the Karate Hottie Michelle Watterson via split decision. Now, Rick, check out these scores, right?
Yeah.
One judge scored about 30-27 Esparza. The other judge scored about 30-27 Watterson. And the final decisive judge scored at 29-28 for Esparza for the split decision.
Okay.
I don't know what fight they were watching in which that they didn't see that. Round one could have gone either way, I believe it was. Round two, though, was clearly Carla Esparza's round.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those, like, what fight were you watching? So,
Well,
that was something of note, I guess.
Well, 30-27 either way, I mean, that's crazy because you have, my rudimentary grasp of math tells me, you have judges going 10-9 the opposite way all 3 rounds. How is that even possible?
Yes. what were they watching? I only had that happen one time at a show, and that I was on. It was a kickboxing show, and it was the main event, which was Alonzo Hollywood Harvey against Smoker Joe Hyland, and they scored it 26-30, 27-30, 27-30. And we're like, what were you watching? Because we think one of the refs accidentally, or one of the judges accidentally thought he was watching an MMA fight.
Evidently.
But moving up the card, man, this is the second fight on, or second or third. We're still on the prelim show here.
Okay.
We're still on live on ESPN. We've got a split decision victory as it's Alexiej Olenek, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. However, here's a name that has fallen far. Former UFC World Heavyweight Champion Fabricio Verdum via split decision 29-28 times 2, and then the other one was 20-29. In a very, very close fight that honestly could have gone either way. Which, when you look at it on paper, I think that really is where Verdum is at right now. He's not getting any younger. He's kind of at, this is his first fight. I think maybe since the Stipe fight or one fight afterwards. And we all know it's a young man's sport. So where Fabricio Verdum goes from here, something tells me we're going to end up seeing fights that seems to be like the senior tour of MMA.
Well, either that or he's going to keep jerking the curtain on these shows here.
As long as they're paying him,
Right.
We'll see.
Pin me, pay me.
And then, yeah, pretty much. Then we got the main event of the preliminary pairs on ESPN. It was Showtime. Anthony Pettis defeated Donald Cowboy Cerrone via unanimous decision 29-28. All three judges, I agreed that was just a back and forth fight. That if you're a fan of either one of these two guys, it's exactly what you expected. You weren't disappointed. That was a perfect fight to give as a segue into the pay-per-view main events on ESPN Plus for multiple reasons. One, you got again the former world champion of tennis, and two, you got Donald Cerrone, who has the most, I believe, the most bonuses, fight of the night bonuses and performance bonuses of anybody's history, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
He is coming off of a recent main event against Conor McGregor. So everybody can see him, so they're going to recognize the name from seeing him, your casual fan.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of business thought process there. And he's going to put on a good show, which he did, which gets us into them setting up to go to the main card on pay-per-view. And overall, this is the best card ever delivered on free TV. The ratings for this were through the roof, which was good, because folks are making hungry for live content. Did you see any of this, Rick Morris?
I did not. I did not catch any of it.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. It is, moving into, but a lot of people did, and it kind of was a template to show, you can do, live sports. It's funny, I'm talking about, baseball is no fans. If you watch any baseball, go watch a baseball game in the middle of, July.
Right.
A damn person there.
That's right. That's right. That goes to a conversation I had with somebody the other day. Who knew that the Miami Marlins were ahead of their time? They've been social distancing at their games for years.
Yeah, exactly. I used to go to old municipal stadium for games.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah.
Have a section to yourself.
Yes. Those were the days, Jake Digman.
But moving into the main portion of the card for the evening, and the live on pay-per-view, which was really funny, seeing Bruce Buffer and do his intro, and Joe Rogan's first immediately he's like, all right, and I'm talking to, ladies and gentlemen, your winner, and there's nobody here. This is weird. They just couldn't get over that fact, which is kind of comical.
Right.
Moving into the main portion of the card, we've got the number one heel in the UFC, and a guy that I think our Uncle Dana is really going to put the old push behind. Greg Hardy defeats Mr. DeCastro here. Jorgen DeCastro being unanimous decision 30-27 all across the board. It was just a boring heavyweight. Greg Hardy just ground him down and pulled the fight. I'm not sure from Hardy. I do believe moves up to either 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
A little. So there's that. And then this is the one I really wanted to get into. This is the one another fight that has spurned off of the events from UFC, which leads to another huge payday, another huge buy rate payday, and what's going on. Francis Ngannou defeats some guy, I can't even pronounce his name. He defeats him by KO and round one. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
He just knocks him in the next good.
Is it possible that his opponent was Alabama junior heavyweight champion Mike Jackson?
Yes, that's who it was. Mike Alabama I don't know.
Okay.
I'm the worst MMA editor ever. Sorry, listeners on that.
You're the best.
Ngannou now. Because I mean, I don't need to know his name right now. He didn't do anything, you know. But that's how your casual fans gonna view it.
Right.
The Francis Ngannou this week all of a sudden on Instagram is yesterday and today, I do believe, is a live post chat with one John Bones Jones about talking about Johnny Bones Jones is coming up to heavyweight. John Bones is like, all right, I'll come up there and kick your butt, pretty much, to paraphrase the whole thing. Which, you know, maybe the pro wrestling aficionado that we are, I'm using great work. There's whole thing there, you know, talking, sharing thoughts back and forth on social media like that. And, you know, jumps in on board and like, okay, listen, you know, if it's a UFC angle, you know, as far as Goddard goes, that's the best career move he can make right now. And if I were him, I would see on a 3-fight winning streak since he lost to Steve Van, I believe. Just before after this one, if I'm him in that position, I wait for the Steve versus DC trilogy to happen. I'll take this fight against. But see, that's the thing. If you take this fight against John Jones at heavyweight, and if John Jones wins, you would think John Jones is automatically aligned to become the #1 contender of the heavyweight championship just because he's John Jones, right?
Right.
But if he's going to test positive for cocaine, and the whole thing's not going to matter anyway, right?
Well, the other thing is here too, and I don't want to oversimplify, but when I hear about a light heavyweight v heavyweight scenario, I understand. I'm not going to compare, by the way. John Bones Jones, I think, having a far apples and oranges maybe, but a little bit apples to apples, a better career, I think, at his level than Michael Spinks had. But what happened when Spinks fought Tyson? Ngannou, again, we know he's not the UFC Tyson. Stipe proved that. But he's Tyson-like in a lot of ways. I don't. That might be a little bit too much raw fury. I mean, you know more about it than I do. But you know, Bones Jones stepping up there to fight a young guy, just kind of finding his way with a lot of raw power. That could be a tough assignment.
But here's the other thing too. What has he got going on right now in the heavyweight division? And quite frankly, if you're the UFC, you're in a position where you want to put on a whatever the biggest money marquee fights that you can get right now.
Yes.
Because the only revenue you have is that pay-per-view holder. So, personally, if you're getting, I think John Jones versus Francis Ngannou, especially they love Ngannou. Oh my God! Ever since he fought Stipe, and even before that, they've been hyping him up as their Tyson.
Yeah.
Which we can talk about that later too. Before we end the show, I want to talk to you about that guy also.
Okay.
Something I was looking at. But I just think that they're trying, as far as on paper goes, and if people be willing to pay money to see it, I think that is the biggest. I mean, Ngannou has nothing to gain. Absolutely nothing.
Right.
If I was a management team, I'd be like, just sit there and wait to get your heavyweight title fight.
Right.
Because he has nothing to gain. The only thing he gains is he lost to a light heavyweight.
Right.
At heavyweight, so it hurts his ranking, and then it bumps Bones up, and Bones really has nothing to gain or lose. Even if he loses, he just goes, I got knocked out by a heavyweight, I went back down to my division.
That's true.
But based on his actions, it's going to be interesting to see how much longer John Jones, how many opportunities John Jones continues to give. Because you could say, it's got quite a few of them and has not stayed on the straight and narrow until now. So we shall see. But, money is money, and when it comes to Uncle Dana, and hey, you can print money for me? Cool. Hey, you killed 3 people? It's fine.
That's right.
Hey, you beat the crap out of your wife and got kicked out of the NFL? Cool. You want a heavyweight title fight?
Yeah, this is where Dana White's amorality comes into play. Well, one of many different ways.
That's what happened with Greg Hart first.
Oh, yeah. The guy is a scumbag.
Yeah. So moving into these 2 headlining fights, the 2 headliners, and I'm sorry, I think on the finish earlier. It was actually the finish to this fight. It was the finish to Henry Cejudo and Dominic Cruz, or Henry Cejudo retained his championship, bantamweight championship, and then he immediately retired.
Right.
This was fucking done. And something tells me that Dominic Cruz may have had the idea to retire based on the look of Cruz's face.
Oh,
when
yeah.
he said when Henry talked But Triple G was doing his speech up there. He just looked like, you mother effer.
Right.
So he's like stole his thunder and just like, all right, well, I guess that's this guy coming to the. Do I think that he's staying retired? No.
Right.
But it was a good little ploy. But maybe he is. Maybe he goes on to do something else. Who knows? I mean, the dude is a beast.
That's right.
Olympic gold medalist and achieving 2 different weight classes in the UFC. Really, nothing else to prove.
Mm-hmm.
All thing really this fight to prove is money, correct?
Right.
And then, of course, we talked a little bit earlier on the main event, absolutely delivering in every way possible. Tony Ferguson brings in every fight that he is in. Came up short this time against the surging Justin Gaethje, who is officially the interim lightweight champion. But I love what he did. As soon as they went to hand him the belt, he didn't even take it. He just threw it on the ground. And Joe Rogan's like, "Why is the belt over there?" He goes, "I'll just wait till I get the real one."
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That sells going forward with him versus Khabib. I do believe this will be taking place at some point in the future. So as far as coming back for the UFC, it was an absolutely fantastic first outing. The fight card again on Tuesday, we talked about one on Wednesday. You and I hit on the most controversial aspects of that. The main event. The rest of the show, it was a fun night of fights. So I can say that it was empty arena UFC is better to watch than empty arena WWE, but not quite empty arena AEW is better than both of them, in my opinion.
Okay.
However, the thing that is very cool, if you're like in the business, as far as like people like the inside, it is very cool hearing guys do commenting to color, to coaching to their guys.
Oh yeah.
Because you can hear play to day. And a thing that happened on the UFC on the pay-per-view, I forget which fight it was during, but they started saying something, and like they're calling it, he's got to go for this, he's got to start commentating the fight, and all of a sudden the fighter in the ring starts doing exactly what they said.
Yeah.
Because